The manila envelope trembled in my hands as I stared at the return address. State Medical Board. After 30 years of practicing medicine, my license renewal should have been routine, but this time was different. My own son had filed a formal complaint questioning my mental competence. I pressed the envelope to my chest and closed my eyes, remembering the moment 3 months ago when I overheard Ben telling Melissa, "Mom's deteriorating. She forgets things, misplaces her keys. It's only a matter of time before she makes a serious medical error. Someone needs to stop her before she hurts a patient." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined that someone would be my own flesh and blood, the same boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out, the same young man whose medical school tuition I'd paid by working extra shifts at the hospital. Now I held the board's decision in my hands, and everything I'd built hung in the balance. I'm Dr. Margaret Reynolds, though most of my patients call me Dr. Maggie. For the past 30 years, I've run Reynolds Family Medicine in the heart of Riverside, a clinic I built from nothing after my husband left when our son Ben was just 7 years old. The clinic sits on Maple Street, wedged between a bakery and a bookstore, with a modest sign that's faded from years in the sun. Every morning at 6:30, I unlock the front door, brew a pot of coffee in the small kitchenette, and review patient charts before my office manager Susan arrives. This morning ritual has remained unchanged for decades, a constant in a life that's weathered many storms. My examination rooms aren't fancy. The equipment is serviceable but not state-of-the-art. Still, generations of families have trusted me with their health. I've delivered babies who grew up to bring their own children to my practice. I've held the hands of the dying, celebrated recoveries, and navigated countless health crises with my patients. When Ben was growing up, he often spent afternoons at the clinic, doing homework in my office or helping Susan file paperwork. I hoped he might follow in my footsteps, but he chose finance instead. "There's more security and money than medicine, Mom," he told me when he declared his major in college. I couldn't argue. I'd spent years struggling to keep the practice afloat, while raising him alone. I remember the day Ben graduated from business school. I sat in the audience bursting with pride, mentally calculating the sacrifices that had made this moment possible. The vacations never taken, the house repairs postponed, the retirement savings depleted to cover his tuition. But seeing him in his cap and gown, confident and accomplished, made every sacrifice worthwhile. "I'm going to take care of you someday, Mom," he promised at his graduation dinner. "You've worked hard enough." That was before he met Melissa at his investment. Firm, smart, ambitious Melissa, with her designer wardrobe and polished demeanor. She came from money and expected to maintain that lifestyle. I tried to welcome her into our small family, inviting them for Sunday dinners, offering advice only when asked, giving them generous gifts for their wedding, despite my limited budget. At first, Ben visited regularly. He'd stop by the clinic for lunch, call to check in a few times a week. But after the wedding, those visits became less frequent. Sunday dinners shifted from my modest home to their sprawling house in Oakwood Estates. Gradually, I noticed a change in how Ben looked at me, with concern that bordered on condescension. "Mom, you really should hire more help at the clinic," he'd say. "You're not getting any younger." I'd laugh it off. "I'm only 58. Ben, hardly 1 foot in the grave." But behind my dismissive responses, I worried. Not about my competence. I knew I was still an excellent physician, but about the growing distance between us. The balance shifted dramatically when I turned down Ben and Melissa's offer to invest my retirement savings in a venture capital fund Ben was managing. "It's guaranteed returns, Mom," he insisted. "You can't keep working forever and your savings aren't enough." He wasn't wrong about my modest savings. Medicine had given me purpose, but not prosperity. My clinic served many patients on Medicare, Medicaid, or payment plans. I could have joined a corporate practice years ago for better pay, but I valued my independence and my relationships with patients too much. I appreciate the offer, Ben, but I'm comfortable with my financial advisor's conservative approach, I told him. Besides, I'm not planning to retire anytime soon. The disappointment in his eyes was unmistakable. Melissa's reaction was cooler. That's certainly your choice, Margaret, she said, using my full name as she always did. But don't expect us to support you if you run out of money. I didn't tell them about my other investment, a small but growing clinic in the underserved east side of Riverside. Dr. Harold Thompson, my mentor from medical school, had approached me about joining his volunteer physician program. What began as one Saturday a month had expanded to a significant commitment and financial contribution. The East Side Clinic didn't generate income, but it fulfilled me in ways that were increasingly important as I entered what I considered the most meaningful phase of my career. The first concerning incident occurred last winter. I'd been working extended hours during a particularly nasty flu season. After a 14-hour day, I stopped by Ben and Melissa's house to drop off a birthday gift for my grandson Noah. I must have looked exhausted because Ben immediately took my arm and led me to a chair. "Mom, you don't look well," he said, his forehead creased with worry. "Have you been forgetting things lately? You seem disoriented." "I'm tired, Ben," I explained. "I've seen 40 patients today." "At your age, that's too much," Melissa interjected from the doorway. "My mother says doctors over 55 have twice the rate of medical errors." I was too exhausted to point out the statistical fallacy in her statement. Instead, I visited briefly with Noah, who showed me his new toy cars and whispered, "Grandma, can we go to the park tomorrow?" "Not tomorrow, honey," Melissa answered for me. "Grandma needs to rest." Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. The concerned glances between Ben and Melissa. The way they spoke about me rather than to me. The gentle but firm way they limited my time with Noah, citing concerns about my energy levels. The second incident was more alarming. I misplaced my prescription pad at the clinic, something that had never happened before. After a frantic hour of searching, Susan found it in the staff refrigerator, underneath my lunch container. "You probably set it down while you were putting your lunch away," she said, relieved. "No harm done." But there was harm when Ben found out. Susan, concerned about my stress levels, had innocently mentioned the incident when she ran into Ben at the grocery store. His reaction was swift. He showed up at my house that evening, pacing in my living room like a prosecutor making his case. "Mom, this is serious. A missing prescription pad could mean narcotics on the street. You could lose your license." "It wasn't missing, Ben. It was misplaced for an hour in a secure area of the clinic. No one has access to the staff kitchen except employees who undergo background checks." "But what if it happens again? What if you misdiagnose someone because you're forgetting things? What if you prescribe the wrong medication?" His questions felt like slaps. In 30 years, I'd never had a malpractice claim, never been cited for any violation by the medical board. My patient satisfaction scores consistently ranked in the top percentile for our region. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but a misplaced prescription pad doesn't indicate cognitive decline. It indicates I was busy and distracted on a hectic day." Ben sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "Mom, I'm worried. Dad had early-onset dementia. You know it can be genetic." My ex-husband Richard had indeed been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, but not until his 60s, and after years of heavy drinking that I suspected had contributed to his condition. I'd been monitored regularly given the family history, with cognitive assessments that always came back normal. "I had my annual physical last month, including cognitive screening," I assured him. "Everything's normal." "Those screenings can miss early signs," Ben insisted. "And you wouldn't necessarily notice yourself. That's the insidious thing about cognitive decline. The patient is often the last to know." That night after Ben left, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, troubled by his persistence. There was genuine concern in his voice, yes, but something else too. A certainty that felt premature, almost eager. I tried to dismiss the thought as uncharitable. Ben loved me. He was looking out for my best interests and the safety of my patients. The next month passed uneventfully until a new patient, Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, came to the clinic complaining of fatigue, weight loss, and night sweats. Her symptoms suggested several possibilities, from menopause to lymphoma. I ordered appropriate tests and scheduled a follow-up. When she returned, her husband accompanied her. He seemed oddly familiar, but I couldn't place him. Mrs. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jenkins's tests indicated a severe autoimmune disorder requiring specialist care. As I explained my findings and referral plan, Mr. Jenkins interrupted repeatedly with questions that felt more like a cross-examination than clarification. And, "You're absolutely certain of this diagnosis, Dr. Reynolds? You haven't overlooked anything? No possibility you've confused my wife's chart with another patient's?" His questions were hostile, his manner aggressive. When he demanded a second opinion, I readily provided referrals to 3 specialists, which seemed to surprise him. "Of course you should get another perspective," I said. "That's good medical practice for any serious diagnosis." As they left, I remembered where I'd seen Mr. Jenkins before. He was a golf partner of Ben's, mentioned occasionally in conversation. The connection seemed insignificant until 3 days later, when Susan brought me a certified letter from the state medical board. "Dr. Reynolds," the letter began formally, "we are in receipt of a complaint questioning your fitness to practice medicine due to alleged cognitive impairment. Per state regulations, we are opening an investigation into this matter." The complaint was anonymous, but the timing and specificity of the allegations, referencing the misplaced prescription pad and misdiagnosis of patients, left little doubt about its source. My hands trembled as I set down the letter. "This is ridiculous," Susan said firmly. "Every doctor misplaces things occasionally, and that Jenkins woman, the specialist, confirmed your diagnosis yesterday. She called to let us know." I sat heavily in my office chair. "Someone is trying to have my license suspended, Susan." "Who would do that?" she asked. "You've got the most loyal patients in Riverside." I didn't answer, but a suspicion was forming that made my stomach clench. That evening I called Ben, trying to keep my voice casual as I asked if he'd seen his friend Jenkins recently. "Scott? Yeah, we played golf last weekend. Why?" "His wife is a patient. I was wondering how she's doing with her new specialist." A pause. "I didn't know Elaine was your patient. Small world." "Very small," I agreed, waiting for him to say more. When he didn't, I asked directly, "Ben, did you discuss my practice with Scott? Perhaps mention that misplaced prescription pad?" "Mom, you know I wouldn't violate your privacy like that." His voice had an edge I recognized from his childhood fibs. "But since you mention it, have you considered cutting back your hours? Or maybe joining a group practice where other doctors could help shoulder the load?" "My practice is fine, Ben. I'm fine." "Are you, though? Susan called me worried about you last week." This was news to me. "Susan called you? About what?" "She said you seemed tired, forgetful." "Mom, we're all concerned. No one's attacking you. We just want what's best for your health and your patient's safety." After we hung up, I called Susan. At home, something I rarely did. "Did you call Ben last week to discuss concerns about me?" I asked without preamble. "What?" "Absolutely not," Susan said firmly. "Dr. Reynolds, I've worked with you for 15 years. If I had concerns, I'd come directly to you." My mind raced. Ben was lying. But why? What could he possibly gain from undermining my practice? The next day, I had lunch with Harold at our usual diner. Harold Thompson had been my advisor in medical school, had championed my career when female physicians were still relatively rare, and had become a dear friend over the decades. Now in his 70s, he still volunteered at the East Side Clinic and kept his medical license active. The board investigation is concerning, but not catastrophic, he reassured me after I confided the situation. You have an impeccable record. They'll ask for statements from colleagues, review your charts, perhaps request a cognitive assessment. Be cooperative, transparent, and this will resolve in your favor. But why would Ben do this? I pushed my salad around my plate. What possible motivation could my son have for trying to end my career? Harold adjusted his glasses, his expression grave. Maggie, is there anything of value Ben might access if you were declared incompetent? Property? Investments? Insurance policies? The question hit like a physical blow. My retirement savings are modest. There's the house, the clinic property, but those would only come to him after my death. Unless you were deemed unable to manage your own affairs, Harold pointed out gently, in which case, as your only child, Ben would likely be appointed your guardian, with control over your assets. That's absurd, I protested. Ben and Melissa live in a house 3 times the size of mine. He manages investment portfolios worth millions. Harold sipped his coffee. People in financial trouble often live in big houses. Has Ben asked for money recently? Tried to involve you in investment opportunities? The venture capital fund. Ben's disappointment when I declined. His increased scrutiny of my mental acuity afterward. A sickening suspicion formed. I need to find out if Ben's in financial trouble, I said slowly. But how? He'd never tell me. Start with public records, Harold suggested. Property lines, civil judgments, they're all searchable online. And perhaps visit the East Side Clinic tomorrow instead of Saturday. There's someone you should meet. The someone turned out to be Catherine Martinez, a former forensic accountant who now directed community outreach at the East Side Clinic. After Harold made introductions, I explained my situation in general terms. I believe my son may be experiencing financial difficulties and targeting my assets as a solution, I said, feeling disloyal even speaking the words. Catherine's expression remained professionally neutral. Financial desperation can motivate people to act against their better nature, even against those they love. What makes you suspect financial problems? I described Ben's behavior, his push for me to invest in his fund, his recent preoccupation with my retirement planning. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. With your permission, I could look into public records related to your son and daughter-in-law. Foreclosure proceedings, tax liens, civil judgments, they leave paper trails. Would you be comfortable with that? It felt like a betrayal, investigating my own son. But if Ben was indeed behind the complaint to the medical board, I needed to understand why. Yes, I decided. Please look. In the meantime, I'll cooperate fully with the board investigation. I have nothing to hide. The next week was grueling. The board investigator, Dr. Patricia Jenkins, no relation to the patient, I was assured, conducted a thorough review of my practice. She interviewed Susan and my nurse practitioner, examined randomly selected patient charts, and observed me during consultations. She also required me to undergo a comprehensive cognitive assessment with a neuropsychologist. Through it all, I maintained my normal schedule, seeing patients, managing the clinic, even volunteering at the East Side facility. I tried to act as though my professional life wasn't hanging in the balance. Ben called daily, his concern seemingly genuine. How are you holding up, Mom? This must be so stressful. I'm fine, Ben. The investigation is going smoothly. I kept my responses vague, unwilling to give him information he might use against me. If you need character witnesses, Melissa and I would be happy to speak to the board, he offered, I thanked him politely, but said Harold and several other colleagues had already provided statements. After hanging up, I wondered if I was becoming paranoid. Could I be misjudging my own son? My doubt evaporated when Catherine called 2 days later. "Dr. Reynolds, I found something you need to see. Can you come to my office today?" The documents Catherine showed me painted a disturbing picture. Ben and Melissa's beautiful home in Oakwood Estates had a second mortgage taken out 6 months ago. There were 3 credit card judgments against Melissa in the past year. Most damning, Ben was named in a civil lawsuit filed by former clients, alleging mismanagement of investment funds. "He's underwater," Catherine said bluntly. "The lawsuit alone could ruin him professionally if it becomes widely known. The plaintiffs are alleging he moved their money into a high-risk venture without proper disclosure, and they lost substantial sums." "How substantial?" I asked, feeling numb. "The filing claims damages of $8 million. The figure was staggering. Ben managed portfolios of that size, but his personal assets nowhere near approached such an amount. If he lost the lawsuit, he'd be ruined." "How does any of this connect to having me declared incompetent?" I asked, though I feared I already knew. Catherine slid another document across the desk. "This is a copy of the trust you established after your divorce. It specifies that in the event of your death or incapacitation, all assets transfer to your son, including the clinic property, which, given commercial real estate values in Riverside, is worth close to $3 million. The clinic property. I'd purchased the building 20 years ago when the elderly owner offered it at below market value, grateful for years of care I'd provided his wife. It had been a stretch financially at the time, but I'd recognized it as an investment in my future. The mortgage was now paid off, and the property value had tripled. "Ben knows about the trust," I said slowly, "but he also knows I have no intention of retiring or selling the clinic." "Unless you were deemed mentally unfit to practice," Catherine pointed out, "in which case the clinic would close, the property would likely be sold, and as your guardian, Ben would control the proceeds." Everything fell into place. Ben's sudden concern about my cognitive abilities, his friend Scott Jenkins bringing his wife to my clinic, then questioning my competence, the anonymous complaint to the medical board. Ben wasn't trying to protect me or my patients. He was trying to save himself from financial ruin. "What do I do with this information?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That depends on what outcome you want," Catherine said. "If you're looking to preserve your practice and your independence, documenting these findings might help counter any move Ben makes to have you declared incompetent. If you're looking to protect your son from legal consequences, that's a different conversation." I sat in silence, turning options over in my mind. My son had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, attacking my professional competence, my personal dignity, and my autonomy. Yet he was still my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the child I'd sacrificed for. "I need time to think," I said finally. That evening, I sat in my garden as dusk fell, the scent of roses heavy in the air. I thought about Ben as a child, his small hand in mine as we navigated life after his father left. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, attending his school plays, celebrating his achievements. I'd given him everything I could, limited only by my financial means, never by my love. How had we arrived at this place where he saw me not as his mother, but as an asset to be liquidated in his time of need? A text message interrupted my thoughts. It was from Susan. "The board's decision letter arrived by courier after you left. It's on your desk. Do you want me to tell you what it says?" "No," I replied. "I'll come in now." The drive to the clinic was a blur. The manila envelope sat on my desk, innocent-looking, yet life-altering. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. "After thorough investigation," the letter began, The state medical board finds no evidence of cognitive impairment or professional incompetence in the practice of Dr. Margaret Reynolds. All allegations are dismissed as unfounded, and Dr. Reynolds' medical license is hereby renewed for the standard 4-year period. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by resolve. I had my license renewal. I had evidence of Ben's financial troubles and probable motives. Now I needed to decide what kind of mother and what kind of person I wanted to be. I sat in my office chair, the license renewal letter still in my hands, as a storm of emotions washed over me, relief, vindication, and then a crushing wave of betrayal that made it difficult to breathe. My son, my only child, had tried to have me declared incompetent for financial gain. The realization settled on my chest like a physical weight. The clinic was quiet at this hour, the reception area dark, examination rooms empty. I'd built this place from nothing while raising Ben alone. Every paint color, every piece of equipment, every framed diploma on the wall represented a choice I'd made, a victory over circumstances. This clinic wasn't just my livelihood, it was my legacy. I reached for my phone to call Ben, then hesitated. What would I say? How do you confront your child about such a fundamental betrayal? I needed a clear head and a strategic approach. This wasn't a simple family disagreement. It was an orchestrated attempt to dismantle my life. Instead, I called Harold. The board renewed my license, I told him when he answered. All allegations dismissed as unfounded. That's wonderful news, Maggie. His voice was warm with genuine pleasure. I never doubted the outcome. Neither did I. But Catherine found evidence that Ben is in serious financial trouble. The complaint to the board almost certainly came from him through a patient connection. He was trying to have me declared incompetent so he could control my assets. Harold was silent for a moment. I'm deeply sorry, Maggie. What will you do now? I don't know yet, but I need to protect myself and my practice. Come to dinner tomorrow, he offered. Catherine will be there too. 3 heads are better than 1. After we hung up, I locked the clinic and walked to my car, the evening air heavy with approaching rain. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Checking in, Mom. How are you feeling today? The casual cruelty of it, asking about my well-being while actively working to undermine me, sent a surge of anger through my body. I didn't respond. At home, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my porch swing, watching lightning flicker on the horizon. The thunderstorm mirrored the tumult in my mind. All these years, I'd believed Ben's happiness was inextricably tied to my own. That his success was my success. His pain, my pain. Now, I had to confront the possibility that my son viewed me as an obstacle, or, worse, merely a resource to be tapped, when needed. I thought about all the times in recent months when Ben had questioned my memory, suggested I was working too hard, expressed concern about my ability to practice safely. Each comment, viewed through the lens of today's revelations, transformed from filial concern to calculated manipulation. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed in bed, replaying conversations and incidents, examining them for clues I should have noticed. By morning, exhaustion had hardened into resolve. I wouldn't confront Ben yet, not until I had protected myself from further attempts to undermine me. My first appointment was with my attorney, Diane Chen, who had helped set up the trust years. I brought the file Catherine had compiled, along with the medical board's decision letter. This is deeply troubling, Diane said after reviewing the documents. From a legal standpoint, you need to revise your estate planning immediately. I want to remove Ben as beneficiary of the trust, I said, the words painful but necessary. Diane's expression was sympathetic but professional. That's certainly your right, but I'd suggest a more nuanced approach. We can modify the trust to include safeguards, perhaps a co-trustee who would prevent hasty liquidation of assets or specific provisions about the continuation of the clinic. What about my medical directive and power of attorney? Ben is named in both. Those should definitely be changed, Diane confirmed. You need someone you trust implicitly to make medical and financial decisions if you become incapacitated. Do you have someone in mind? Harold was the obvious choice, though at 70 he might not outlive me by much. Yes, but I'll need a backup as well. We spent the next hour revising documents. By the time I left Diane's office, I had a new medical directive, power of attorney, and trust provisions that would protect the clinic from being sold without significant oversight. The changes wouldn't be official until formally executed and filed, which would take about a week. One more thing, Diane said as I was leaving. Document everything. Every interaction with Ben, any unusual patient encounters, any discrepancies at the clinic. Start keeping a detailed journal. If there's another attempt to question your competence, contemporaneous notes will be invaluable. My next stop was the bank. I opened a new checking account at a different institution from where Ben and I had always banked, transferring enough funds for several months of expenses. I didn't think Ben had access to my accounts, but I couldn't be certain what measures he might have taken. After the bank, I went to the clinic. Susan looked up in surprise when I walked in. Dr. Reynolds, I thought you were taking the morning off. Change of plans, I said, trying to sound casual. Susan, has Ben ever called you asking about my behavior at work? Or has he ever come to the clinic when I wasn't here? Susan's hesitation told me everything before she spoke. He calls occasionally to check on you. And he did stop by one afternoon when you were at the Eastside Clinic. He said he was dropping off some papers for you to sign, but you hadn't mentioned anything. She looked troubled. Should I not have let him into your office? It's not your fault, Susan. But going forward, Ben doesn't come into my office without me present, and he doesn't get information about my schedule or my patients. If he asks, tell him to speak to me directly. Susan's eyes widened. Is everything okay, Dr. Reynolds? I considered how much to share with my office manager of 15 years, who knew more about the daily operations of the clinic than anyone except me. Not really, I admitted. Ben filed the complaint with the medical board. He's trying to have me declared incompetent so he can control my assets. Susan's face flushed with anger. That little... She stopped herself. Sorry, Dr. Reynolds. But how could he do that to you after everything you've done for him? He's in financial trouble, and he sees the clinic property as his salvation. I sighed. I need your help, Susan. I need you to be extra vigilant about clinic operations, patient records, prescription pads, anything that could be used to suggest impropriety or incompetence. Of course, she agreed immediately. Should we install security cameras? We've talked about it before for general safety. It was a good suggestion. Yes, let's do that. And let's upgrade the computer security as well. Change all the passwords. The rest of the day, I saw patients as usual, though each interaction now carried a new weight. Was this patient genuinely seeking care, or were they another plant like Mrs. Jenkins? I hated the suspicion that crept into my normally trusting doctor-patient relationships. By evening, I was emotionally drained, but had taken concrete steps to protect myself. I drove to Harold's house for dinner, the weight of the day sitting heavily on my shoulders. Catherine arrived shortly after I did, bringing a bottle of wine and a folder of additional documents. More bad news? I asked wearily as she set the folder on Harold's dining table. Not news exactly. More context. Catherine opened the folder to reveal printouts of social media posts and news articles. Melissa's spending habits are, shall we say, conspicuous. She frequently posts about luxury purchases, vacations, home renovations. The disconnect between their apparent lifestyle and their financial reality is stark. I scanned the posts, photos of Melissa in designer clothes, standing beside a new luxury SUV, lounging by resort pools. Each image was a knife twist, knowing that while she projected affluence, my son was desperate enough to try to seize control of my assets. How could I have raised someone capable of this? I asked, pushing the folder away. Where did I go wrong? Harold placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You didn't go wrong, Maggie. You raised a good boy who became a man who made bad choices. The financial pressure he's under, the lifestyle expectations, they can warp judgment. Harold's right, Catherine added. I've seen similar situations in my forensic work. Financial desperation can make otherwise decent people rationalize terrible actions, especially when they're trying to maintain appearances. So what now? I asked, accepting the glass of wine Harold offered. I've changed my legal documents, secured my finances, and implemented new security at the clinic, but I still don't know how to confront Ben. We discussed options over dinner. Catherine favored a direct approach, presenting Ben with the evidence and clear consequences. Harold suggested involving a family therapist to mediate the confrontation. Both had merit, but neither felt right to me. I need to understand more first, I said finally. I need to know if Ben truly believes I'm in cognitive decline, or if he's just using that as a convenient excuse. And I need to know if he's capable of recognizing the gravity of what he's done. How will you determine that? Catherine asked. I'm going to give him one last chance to be honest with me. The next day was Saturday, normally my day at the East Side Clinic, but I'd arranged coverage so I could instead invite Ben to breakfast at the Garden Cafe, a restaurant we'd frequented since he was a child. The familiar setting might make him more receptive, more reminiscent of simpler times between us. Ben arrived looking harried, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. Sorry I'm late, Mom. Client emergency. He kissed my cheek. Before sitting down, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. You're looking well. How are you feeling? I'm fine, Ben, but we need to talk about something important. I took a deep breath. The medical board completed their investigation. My license has been renewed without any restrictions or conditions. He paused, coffee cup halfway to his lips. That's great news, but they must have had concerns to investigate in the first place. The complaint was without merit. Someone made allegations about my competence that had no basis in fact. I held his gaze steadily. I'm trying to understand why someone would do that. Ben set down his cup, a flush creeping up his neck. People file complaints for all sorts of reasons. Mom, disgruntled patients, competitors, or family members in financial distress, looking to gain control of assets. I kept my voice low, mindful of other diners nearby. Ben, I know about the lawsuit, the second mortgage, Melissa's credit judgments. I know you're in trouble. His face drained of color. How could you possibly... He stopped, composing himself. That's private information. You had no right to investigate me. Just as you had no right to try to have me declared incompetent. I pulled the manila envelope from my bag, sliding it across the table. The medical board sent me copies of all documents related to the complaint. The initial letter came from Scott Jenkins, 2 days after his wife became my patient. You and Scott golf together regularly. The allegations precisely mirror concerns you've raised about my memory and judgment in recent months. Ben stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. That's circumstantial at best. Perhaps. But tell me honestly, are you in financial trouble, Ben? He hesitated, then his shoulders slumped. It's bad, Mom, but I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean it to go? Did you think having your mother declared mentally unfit was a small thing? My voice cracked despite my efforts to remain calm. You don't understand. I made some investment mistakes, big ones. Clients lost money, a lot of money. They're suing. If I can't settle, I'll lose my license, maybe face criminal charges. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his childhood that my heart ached despite my anger. I just needed access to capital. The clinic property is worth millions, and you're not getting any younger. You could retire comfortably on that money. So you decided to force my retirement by having my medical license revoked. Not revoked, just... I thought a competency review might lead to a conversation about scaling back, transitioning to retirement. He couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't think they'd put you through a full investigation. You were willing to destroy my professional reputation, my identity, to solve your financial problems. The magnitude of his betrayal still stunned me, instead of coming to me honestly and asking for help. Would you have helped? His tone turned bitter. You've always chosen the clinic over everything else. Over a nicer house, over vacations, over remarrying. Even now, you're spending what little free time you have at that charity clinic on the east side. The clinic wasn't a choice over you, Ben. It was a choice for you. Every sacrifice I made was to give you opportunities, to provide stability after your father left. I felt tears threatening and took a moment to compose myself. But that's not the point. The point is that you betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way. Ben's defensiveness faltered. I was desperate, Mom. I am desperate. Melissa doesn't even know how bad things are. I've been moving money around, taking out loans, trying to keep up appearances. If I can't find a solution, I'll lose everything. My marriage, my career, maybe even face jail time. For a moment, I saw my son as he truly was, not the confident financial advisor in tailored suits, but a frightened man drowning in consequences of his own making. Despite everything, my maternal instinct to protect him surfaced. Why didn't you just talk to me? I would have helped however I could. You've always been so independent, so strong. You never needed anyone's help. I didn't want to be a burden. He swallowed hard, and I was ashamed. I screwed up, Mom, badly. Shame doesn't justify what you tried to do to me. I know. He stared down at his untouched breakfast. What happens now? It was the question I'd been wrestling with since discovering his betrayal. What does a mother do when her child commits an unforgivable act? What consequences would be appropriate, necessary, healing? I've changed my medical directive and power of attorney, I said. Harold Thompson is now my designated decision-maker, if I become incapacitated. I've also modified my trust to prevent the clinic from being sold without significant oversight. Ben nodded, accepting these changes without protest. And us? What happens to us? That depends on you. On whether you genuinely understand the harm you tried to cause, and whether you're willing to make amends, not just to me, but to yourself. What does that mean? It means complete honesty from this point forward. It means getting proper, financial and legal advice about your situation, not grasping at unethical solutions. It means rebuilding trust day by day, with no guarantees. Ben was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. I don't deserve another chance. Probably not, I agreed. But you're still my son, and I believe redemption is possible for anyone truly seeking it. Even after what I did? Even after what you tried to do, I corrected. You didn't succeed, Ben. I'm still practicing medicine. The clinic is secure. Your plan failed. He winced at my bluntness. I'm sorry, Mom. More sorry than I can express. Sorry isn't enough. I need to see changed behavior, starting with how you handle your current crisis. I pulled a business card from my wallet and placed it beside his plate. This is Daniel Mercer. He's a financial crimes attorney who specializes in securities cases. Call him on Monday. Tell him everything. He'll give you honest advice about your options. A lawyer will just tell me to prepare for the worst. Maybe the worst is what you need to face to start rebuilding. I gathered my purse, preparing to leave. One more thing, Ben. I want you to come volunteer at the East Side Clinic next Saturday. He looked startled. I'm not a doctor. What would I do there? You'll see what I actually do with my time. You'll meet the people I serve, and maybe you'll understand that value isn't always measured in dollars. I left Ben sitting at the table, staring at the attorney's card. Walking to my car, I felt lighter than I had in days, though the pain remained. I'd given Ben a path to redemption, but whether he would take it remained to be seen. That afternoon, I received a text from him. Made an appointment with Mercer for Monday morning. We'll be at the clinic on Saturday. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The week that followed was surreal in its normalcy. I saw patients, managed the clinic, supervised the installation of new security cameras, and finalized the changes to my legal documents. Ben didn't call or visit, which was probably wise. We both needed time to process what had happened and what might come next. Saturday arrived with a clear sky and mild temperature, perfect for the community health fair the Eastside Clinic was hosting. By the time Ben arrived, the parking lot was filled with tables offering blood pressure screenings, diabetes education, nutrition information, and children's dental checks. "You're organizing all this?" Ben asked, looking around at the bustling activity. Catherine Martinez is the primary organizer. I'm just one of many volunteers. I handed him a volunteer t-shirt. You'll be helping at the registration table. Harold will show you what to do. For the first hour, I watched from a distance as Ben awkwardly greeted people, filled out forms, and directed them to various stations. His designer clothes and polished manner stood out among the predominantly working-class residents of the East Side, but he seemed to be making an effort to connect. During a brief lull, I approached him. "How's it going?" "It's eye-opening," he admitted. "I had no idea there was such a need for basic medical services in Riverside. Most people don't. That's why we're here." I nodded toward an elderly woman making her way slowly toward the registration table. "Mrs. Delgado needs her blood pressure checked. Would you escort her to that table over there?" Ben offered his arm to the elderly woman, who smiled up at him as they walked slowly across the lot. I turned away to help a young mother with 3 children. But periodically I glimpsed Ben becoming more engaged, more present with the community. Members he was assisting. By mid-afternoon, the formal health fair activities were winding down, but a line still formed at the clinic door for walk-in consultations. I was examining a child with an ear infection when Susan texted me. "Dr. Jenkins, from the medical board, is here asking to speak with you." My heart raced. Had there been another complaint? I finished with my patient, prescribed antibiotics, and stepped out to find Dr. Patricia Jenkins waiting in the small break room. "Dr. Reynolds," she greeted me formally. "I apologize for interrupting your volunteer work." "Is there a problem with my license?" I asked directly. "Not at all. Quite the opposite." She smiled slightly. "The board was impressed by your professionalism during our investigation, and by the quality of care evident in your practice review. We're establishing a new mentorship program for physicians under investigation for minor infractions, and we'd like you to consider becoming a mentor." It was the last thing I'd expected. "You want me to mentor doctors who are under investigation? Your experience could be invaluable to colleagues navigating the process. You maintained your practice, your composure, and your standards throughout a stressful investigation. Not everyone manages that balance so well." I was still processing this unexpected turn when Ben appeared in the doorway. "Mom, there's a little boy out here with a pretty bad cut on his arm. The volunteer nurse thinks he needs stitches." "Excuse me, Dr. Jenkins. We can continue this conversation in a moment." I followed Ben to the examination room where a boy of about 10 sat holding his arm, tears streaming down his face. "What happened, buddy?" I asked, gently examining the laceration. "I was climbing the fence and it caught on a sharp part," he sniffled. "Am I gonna need a shot?" "We'll need to clean and close this cut," I explained. "But we have special numbing gel so the shot won't hurt much." I turned to Ben. "I need an assistant. Wash your hands and put on gloves." To my surprise, Ben complied without hesitation. For the next 20 minutes, he handed me instruments, helped keep the boy distracted with silly jokes, and even held the wound closed while I sutured. When we finished, the boy gave us both high fives with his good arm and proudly showed off his bandage to his waiting mother. "You have good hands," I told Ben as we cleaned up. "Steady under pressure. I guess I inherited something useful from you after all." His attempt at humor fell flat, but I appreciated the effort. "You did well today," I said. "Thank you for being here." Ben looked around the modest clinic with its outdated equipment and worn furniture. "I understand better now why you won't sell this place. It's not just about the property or the practice, it's about the people. It always has been." Dr. Jenkins was still waiting when we finished, and I introduced her to Ben. "Your mother is an exceptional physician," she told him. The medical board was thoroughly impressed with her practice and her professionalism. Ben had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, she is exceptional, in every way. After Dr. Jenkins left with my tentative agreement to consider the mentorship role, Ben and I walked outside to find the health fair mostly cleaned up, volunteers packing the last tables into trucks. "I met with Attorney Mercer on Monday," Ben said abruptly. "He thinks I should self-report to the Securities Commission before the lawsuit forces an investigation. I'll probably lose my license, at least temporarily. There might be fines, maybe. Worse. That sounds like honest advice." "It's terrifying advice." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "But I'm going to do it. I'm going to face this head on." "What about Melissa? Does she know yet?" Ben winced. "I told her Thursday night. She didn't take it well. She's staying with her parents while she processes the implications, as she put it." "I'm sorry, Ben. That must be painful." "Not as painful as knowing I betrayed my mother, the one person who's always been there for me." He looked directly at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I keep thinking about what I almost did to you, how close I came to destroying your life to save mine. I don't know how to live with that knowledge." "One day at a time," I said. "That's how we live with our worst mistakes. We acknowledge them, make amends where possible, and try to be better going forward. Will you ever trust me again?" It was the question that had haunted me all week. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But I'm willing to give you the opportunity to try." We stood in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the parking lot. Around us, the East Side neighborhood continued its Saturday rhythms. Children playing in nearby yards, older residents sitting on porches, the occasional car passing with music drifting from open windows. It struck me how rarely Ben had visited this part of Riverside, how separate our worlds had become despite our connection. "Why did you become a doctor, Mom?" Ben asked suddenly. "You never really told me." The question surprised me. I wanted to help people in a direct, tangible way, and I was good at science, good with my hands. It seemed like the natural path. But why family medicine? You were at the top of your class. You could have chosen a more lucrative specialty. I thought about my early days in medical school, the various rotations through specialties, the moment I knew family medicine was my calling. I wanted relationships with my patients, not just procedures. I wanted to know their stories, their families, to be part of their lives over years. That doesn't happen as much in other specialties. Ben nodded slowly. "I think I understand that better now, after today. Seeing how people look at you, how they trust you, it's something special." It was an acknowledgement that touched me deeply. For years, I'd sensed Ben's tacit disapproval of my modest practice, my decision to serve a community that included many low-income patients. He'd never understood why I didn't upgrade to a more prestigious setting, why I drove a 10-year-old car when specialists his friends' parents made twice what I did. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. We walked toward our cars, the conversation shifting to practical matters, when he would meet with the Securities Commission, what legal consequences he might face, how he would rebuild his life if his license was suspended. One thing at a time, I advised. Focus on being honest now. The rest will follow. As we reached my car, Ben hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will you come to dinner tomorrow?" "Not at the house. Melissa's taken most of the furniture anyway. Just somewhere simple. I'd like to talk more, if you're willing." It was a small request, a tentative step toward whatever our relationship might become. "Yes," I agreed. "I'd like that." Driving home, I reflected on the day's unexpected developments. The medical board's request, Ben's participation at the clinic, his decision to self-report his financial misconduct. None of these changed the fact of his betrayal, but they suggested possibilities I hadn't considered when I first discovered what he'd done. The next morning, I woke early and walked in my garden, the dew-damp grass soaking my slippers. The roses needed pruning, the vegetable beds weeding. I'd neglected them in the chaos of recent weeks, kneeling in the soil, pulling weeds and deadheading flowers. I felt a familiar peace settle over me. Gardens were forgiving, resilient. With proper care, even the most neglected plants could revive. Could the same be true of a damaged relationship between mother and son? The Sunday dinner with Ben took place at a small Italian restaurant downtown, a neutral territory where we had occasionally celebrated milestones in the past. I arrived early, selecting a corner booth for privacy. The restaurant was quiet, with only a few other tables occupied, soft music playing in the background. When Ben walked in, I was struck by how different he looked from the successful financial advisor who had lectured me about retirement just weeks earlier. His shoulders were slumped, the confidence drained from his posture. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I said I would." I kept my tone even, my face composed. Years of delivering difficult diagnoses had taught me to control my expressions. The server came for our drink orders. Ben hesitated, then asked for water. "I'm avoiding alcohol right now, trying to keep a clear head through all this." It was a small thing, but it registered as a positive sign. A man drowning in problems often reaches for substances that numb the pain. Ben was choosing clarity instead. I spoke with Mercer again. "This morning," he said after the server left. "The self-reporting process to the Securities Commission starts tomorrow. He thinks there's a chance, a small one, that I could keep a restricted license if I make full restitution." "And can you? Make full restitution?" Ben stared down at the table. "Not without selling everything. The house, the cars, cashing out what's left of my 401k. Even then, it might not be enough." "What about Melissa? Is she willing to make those sacrifices with you?" His bitter laugh told me everything. "Melissa made it clear she didn't sign up for this. Her father's a partner at Westbrook Financial. She thought she was marrying into security, not scandal." I wasn't surprised. I'd never quite warmed to my daughter-in-law, though I'd tried for Ben's sake. There had always been something calculating in her manner, a sense that her affection was conditional upon Ben maintaining a certain lifestyle. "I'm sorry, Ben. Divorce on top of everything else would be a heavy burden." It's hard to tell which would be worse, staying in a marriage that's become transactional or facing all this alone. He looked up at me, his eyes weary. "I'm sorry to dump this on you after everything I've done. I just don't have anyone else to talk to right now." The server returned with our drinks and took our dinner orders. I waited until she left before responding. "I'm still your mother, Ben. That hasn't changed, despite recent events." "But everything else has, hasn't it?" He fidgeted with his napkin. "I've been thinking about what you said, about understanding why the clinic matters so much to you. I never really got it before yesterday. I saw the clinic as just a building, an asset that was sitting there while you worked yourself to exhaustion. And now? Now I see it's something you built, something that matters to people who need it. I never understood why you chose to practice in that neighborhood instead of somewhere more affluent, somewhere you could have charged higher rates, lived more comfortably. He paused. But yesterday, watching you with that boy, seeing how you talked to people, how they responded to you, I started to understand. It was a moment of awareness I'd long wished for. Ben recognizing the value in my choices beyond monetary measures. That it came now, in the midst of his disgrace and my betrayal, carried a painful irony. The clinic is my life's work, I said simply. Not just the building, but what happens inside it. The relationships, the trust, the ability to help people, navigate their health over decades. That's what I couldn't bear to lose. And I tried to take it from you. The self-recrimination in his voice was raw. I've spent days trying to understand how I could have convinced myself that was acceptable, how I justified it. How did you? I was genuinely curious about his rationalization process. Ben took a long drink of water before answering. It started small, just concerns about you working too hard, getting older. Then, when the financial pressure started building, those concerns evolved. I told myself you were approaching retirement age anyway, that the stress of running the clinic alone wasn't good for you, that you deserved rest. He grimaced. But those were just excuses. The truth is, I was desperate and selfish. Our food arrived, but neither of us had much appetite. We picked at our meals in silence for a few minutes. The weight of unspoken thoughts hung between us, years of misunderstandings and divergent values now exposed in the harsh light of crisis. What happens after tomorrow? I asked finally. After you self-report? Best case? I negotiate a settlement agreement, pay fines, accept a suspension of my license, and eventually rebuild with severe restrictions. Worst case? Criminal charges? Possible jail time. His fork clattered against his plate as his hand trembled slightly. It's terrifying, Mom. I've built my entire identity around financial success. I don't know who I am without it. The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in me. How often had I wondered the same about myself? Who would I be if I couldn't practice medicine? What remained of Dr. Margaret Reynolds if you removed the doctor? We are more than our professions, Ben, more than our successes or failures. I reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. You'll discover that now, though not in the way you would have chosen. How do you know? Because that's what happens in times of crisis. We're stripped down to our essential selves. What remains is who we truly are. He considered this, pushing pasta around his plate. I don't like who I am right now. Then, this is your opportunity to become someone different, someone better. The rest of dinner passed with talk of practical matters. What Ben would say to the Securities Commission, how he would manage financially during the coming months, whether he would contest Melissa's divorce filing or negotiate an amicable separation. It wasn't warm mother-son conversation, but it was honest, and that felt like a fragile beginning. As we waited for the check, Ben hesitated, then asked, "Would you be willing to come with me to the Securities Commission tomorrow?" "Not inside. I need to do that alone. But maybe just wait outside? I know I don't deserve your support, but it would help knowing you're there." The request surprised me. It was humble, vulnerable, qualities I'd rarely seen in the polished, confident man my son had become. It reminded me of the 7-year-old Ben asking me to wait outside his classroom on the first day at a new school after his father left. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you." He insisted on paying the bill, though I knew his finances were precarious. It was a small gesture of responsibility I chose not to challenge. Outside the restaurant, the spring evening was mild, stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. We stood awkwardly by our cars, the conversation winding down to its natural conclusion. "One more thing," Ben said as I turned to leave. "I want you to know I'm going to make this right, somehow. Not just with the Securities Commission, but with you. I don't know how yet, but I will. Start by being honest, with yourself, with the authorities, with me. That's foundation enough for now." As I drove home, I reflected on the evening. Ben's remorse seemed genuine, his understanding of the magnitude of his actions clear. But trust, once shattered, couldn't be restored through a single contrite conversation. The path ahead would be long and uncertain for both of us. Monday morning dawned clear and warm. I had rearranged my clinic schedule to accompany Ben to the Securities Commission offices downtown. We agreed to meet in the lobby of the government building at 9. I arrived early, watching people stream in and out, government workers, lawyers, citizens attending to bureaucratic necessities. How strange that among them, my son would shortly be confessing to financial misconduct that could end his career. Ben arrived precisely at 9, dressed in a conservative suit, carrying a leather portfolio. His face was pale but composed, his handshake with me formal, as though we were mere acquaintances. "Mr. Mercer is meeting me upstairs," he said, voice strained. "He says the initial meeting will probably last about 2 hours. "I'll be here," I promised. "There's a cafe across the street. I'll wait there and keep my phone on." Ben nodded, swallowing hard. "Mom, whatever happens in there, thank you for being here today. You're still my son, Ben. That doesn't change." I watched him walk through security and disappear into an elevator before crossing to the cafe. I ordered tea and opened the novel I'd brought, but the words swam before my eyes, impossible to focus on. Instead, I found myself thinking about the years after Richard left, when it was just Ben and me against the world. I remembered nights studying medical journals, after Ben was asleep, determined to stay current in my field despite the demands of single parenthood. I remembered Ben's science projects spread across our tiny kitchen table, the pride in his eyes when his volcano won first place. I remembered teaching him to drive in an empty parking lot, both of us laughing as he struggled with the clutch of my old manual transmission car. Somewhere along the way, that close-knit team of two had fractured. Ben had adopted values I didn't share, equating worth with wealth, status with happiness. I had remained focused on my patients, my community service, finding fulfillment in work Ben clearly viewed as beneath his aspirations. The distance had grown so gradually I'd barely noticed, until suddenly my son was a stranger capable of betraying me for financial gain. 2 hours stretched to 3, then 4. I ordered lunch, answered emails on my phone, and tried not to imagine worst-case scenarios unfolding upstairs. Just after 2 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Coming. Down now." I hurried back to the government building, reaching the lobby just as Ben emerged from the elevator. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but there was also a hint of relief in his expression. "How did it go?" I asked when he reached me. "About as well as could be expected. They're launching a formal investigation of course, but Mercer thinks my voluntary disclosure will count significantly in my favor. I've agreed to surrender my license temporarily during the investigation." "And your client's funds?" "That's the hardest part. I've agreed to liquidate personal assets to begin restitution, but it won't cover everything immediately. There will be a payment plan, probably spanning years." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of fatigue. "But no criminal charges filed yet, which Mercer says is promising." We walked outside, the bright afternoon sunlight harsh after the dimness of the lobby. Ben squinted upward as though seeing the sky for the first time. "What happens now?" I asked. "I start dismantling the life I built. Sell the house, the cars, anything of value. Find a job that doesn't require my license. Figure out who I am when I'm not Benjamin Wilson, financial advisor. He gave a humorless laugh. Maybe I'll finally learn a practical skill, like plumbing or electrical work. Something honest. The self-pity in his tone grated, but I recognized it as part of the process. Ben was grieving the loss of his identity, his status, his marriage. That grief would need to run its course before true change could begin. One step at a time, I advised. You've taken the first and hardest one today. I doubt that, he said grimly. The hardest is yet to come, when friends and colleagues find out, when my clients learn what happened to their money. He checked his watch. I should go. I need to clear out my office by 5. The firm doesn't want me there when staff arrives tomorrow. Do you want help? He looked surprised by the offer. You'd do that? After everything? Yes. And so that afternoon, I found myself in the gleaming offices of Westbrook Financial, helping my son pack his professional life into cardboard boxes. The space spoke of success and affluence, expensive furniture, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling. Windows with views of the river. Ben's corner office was particularly impressive, with awards and credentials displayed prominently on the walls. As we worked, a few colleagues stopped by, conversations awkward and brief. Most avoided the office entirely, though I noticed curious glances through the glass walls. News traveled fast in professional circles. Everyone likely knew something was happening, even if details remained confidential. Vultures are already circling, Ben muttered as a particularly ambitious-looking young man peered in for the 3rd time. Parker's probably already calculating how to absorb my client list. Focus on what you're doing, not on what others think, I advised, carefully wrapping a Crystal Award in newspaper. Their opinions can't define you unless you let them. Easy to say when you haven't built your life around others' perceptions. He sighed, staring at the wall of credentials he was now taking down. I wanted to make you proud, to show you I could be successful, important, more than the child of a small-town doctor. The admission caught me off guard. Ben, I've always been proud of you, from your first steps to your college graduation. Your career choice never changed that. But you never understood it either. You never valued what I did the way you valued your own work. There was truth in his accusation. I'd respected Ben's intelligence and work ethic, but I'd never fully appreciated his field. In my mind, finance had always seemed abstract, disconnected from the tangible human needs I addressed daily. Perhaps I didn't, I acknowledged, but that was my limitation, not a judgment of your worth. We finished packing in silence, each lost in private thoughts. The office that had once displayed Ben's success now stood empty, bare walls and vacant desk, a stark visual representation of his fall. As we carried the last boxes to his car, Ben said, I listed the house today. The realtor thinks it will sell quickly, even at a slight discount for a fast closing. Melissa's already moved most of her things out. Where will you go? He shrugged. I found a month-to-month rental, a small apartment near downtown. It's nothing special, but it's all I can afford right now. I hesitated, then offered. You could stay with me if you need to. The guest room is always available. Ben looked at me, surprise evident. You'd let me stay in your home? Even now? You're still my son, I said simply, and everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. He shook his head. I appreciate the offer, but I think I need to do this on my own. Hit bottom, face consequences, all that therapeutic jargon. He managed a weak smile. Besides, we probably need some space from each other while we figure out whatever comes next. He was right, though part of me, the mother who had bandaged skinned knees and soothed childhood nightmares, wanted to shelter him from the storm he'd created. But Ben wasn't a child anymore, and these weren't skinned knees. His healing would require independence, not protection. The offer stands. If things change, I said. Now, do you have groceries at this new apartment? Mom, I'm 34, not 14. I can handle grocery shopping. Humor me. It's what mothers do when we don't know what else to do. So we stopped at a supermarket on the way to his new apartment, filling a cart with basics. It was a strangely normal activity amidst the chaos of the day, selecting produce, debating bread brands, adding a few comfort foods to the otherwise practical list. For a brief time, we were just mother and son doing ordinary things. The weight of betrayal and disgrace temporarily set aside. The apartment was indeed small and sparsely furnished, a far cry from the luxurious home he'd shared with Melissa. It occupied the second floor of an older house with sloped ceilings and creaky wooden floors. Ben set down the grocery bags on a chipped laminate counter and looked around with a grimace. "It's temporary," he said, as though reassuring himself. "Just until I get back on my feet." I nodded, helping him unpack groceries into the dated cabinets. "It's clean and safe. That's what matters right now." "I suppose so." He leaned against the counter, fatigue evident in every line of his body. "It's strange. 24 hours ago, I was terrified of facing the Securities Commission, of admitting what I'd done. Now that it's over, I just feel empty. That's normal after any major ordeal. The adrenaline fades and leaves exhaustion behind. Does it get better? This feeling like I've ruined everything beyond repair?" I thought carefully before answering. "Yes, but not quickly, and not in a straight line. There will be days when moving forward seems impossible and days when hope returns. The key is to keep going, one foot in front of the other, even on the worst days." Ben nodded slowly. "Thank you for today, for waiting, for helping with the office, for—" He gestured at the groceries. "This. All of it. That's what family does, Ben, even when things are complicated." I left shortly after, driving home through the quiet streets of early evening. Exhaustion settled over me as the day's tension ebbed. I had supported my son through this critical moment, maintained my boundaries, offered appropriate help without enabling. It felt like navigating a treacherous mountain path. One misstep could send us tumbling backward, but the correct route remained unclear. The next morning at the clinic, Susan updated me on the security changes we'd implemented. New cameras, upgraded computer passwords, restricted access to medical records and prescription pads. "No one gets into sensitive areas without proper authorization now," she assured me, "and all visitors are logged." "Thank you for handling this so efficiently. It's the least I could do." She hesitated, then asked, "Have you spoken with Ben?" I nodded, giving her a brief edited account of his meeting with the Securities Commission and the surrender of his license. Susan had always had a soft spot for Ben, having watched him grow up around the clinic. "That poor kid," she said, then quickly corrected herself. Not that what he did was excusable. It wasn't. But losing everything at his age, that's a hard fall. "It is," I agreed. "But sometimes we need to hit bottom before we can rebuild properly." The day proceeded with its usual rhythm of patient appointments, paperwork, phone calls, and follow-ups. The familiar routine was comforting after the emotional turbulence of recent days. Here in the clinic, I knew exactly who I was and what was expected of me. My competence wasn't in question. My judgment was trusted. The contrast with Ben's situation, stripped of professional identity, facing an uncertain future, couldn't have been starker. Late that afternoon, as I was finishing, patient notes Dr. Patricia Jenkins called. "Dr. Reynolds, I wanted to follow up on our conversation at the Eastside Clinic. Have you had a chance to consider the mentorship program?" The medical board's request had been overshadowed by Ben's crisis. "I've been thinking about it," I said, cautiously. "Could you tell me more about what would be involved?" "Of course. The program pairs experienced physicians with colleagues under investigation for minor infractions. documentation errors, communication issues, boundary questions. Nothing involving actual patient harm or serious misconduct. She paused. Many good doctors find themselves before the board for fixable problems, often stemming from burnout or personal stress. A mentor who's navigated the process successfully can make a significant difference in outcomes. The concept appealed to me. Throughout my career, I'd informally mentored younger physicians, enjoying the opportunity to share hard-won wisdom and perspective. This would be more structured, with specific objectives, but the core idea was similar. I'd like to participate, I decided. When would it start? We're launching the program next month. There would be a brief training session, then matching with your first mentee. The time commitment is flexible, generally a few hours a month, primarily via phone or video conference. That sounds manageable with my schedule. Excellent. I'll email the details. Dr. Jenkins hesitated, then added, If I may speak personally for a moment, Dr. Reynolds, your grace under pressure during the investigation was remarkable. That quality is exactly what struggling physicians need in a mentor. After the call ended, I sat in my office, turning over Dr. Jenkins's words. Grace under pressure. Had I really shown that? The investigation had been among the most stressful experiences of my professional life, threatening everything I'd built. Yet I'd continued seeing patients, maintained my volunteer work, cooperated fully with the board's requirements. Perhaps there was a certain grace in simply carrying on when the ground beneath you threatens to give way. That evening at home, I was preparing dinner when my phone rang. It was Ben. Mom, you won't believe what just happened. I got a job. Already? That's wonderful news. It's nothing fancy, he clarified quickly. I'm going to be managing the office at the East Side Clinic. Catherine called this afternoon and offered it to me. Said they needed someone with financial and administrative skills. I was as surprised as Ben. Catherine hadn't mentioned this possibility during our conversations. Did she say why she thought of you? Apparently, Harold suggested it. Said, I showed potential at the health fair. He sounded bewildered. The salary is about a quarter of what I was making before, but it's something, and better than being unemployed while the investigation continues. When do you start? Next Monday. Catherine's going to train me on their systems. His voice grew hesitant. You're okay with this, right? Me working at the clinic where you volunteer? I told Catherine I needed to check with you first. The question gave me pause. How would I feel seeing Ben regularly in that setting? Would his presence change my relationship with a place that had become a sanctuary? I think it's a good opportunity, I said finally. You'll learn a lot about healthcare administration, and Catherine runs a tight operation. She won't let you coast. Oh, I got that impression already, Ben said with a nervous laugh. She made it very clear this wasn't charity, that I'd be expected to earn every dollar. Catherine doesn't believe in handouts, but she does believe in second chances. She's hired several people with complicated backgrounds over the years. So, I'm just the latest charity case, Ben said, a hint of his old bitterness creeping in. No, you're someone being offered an opportunity to demonstrate your value in a new context. What you make of it is entirely up to you. There was silence on the line as Ben absorbed this. You're right, he finally said. And I'm grateful for the chance. This isn't how I pictured my life going. You know? Few of us end up exactly where we expected, Ben. The question is, what we do with where we find ourselves. After hanging up, I finished preparing my solitary dinner, thoughts churning. Ben working at the East Side Clinic presented both opportunities and complications. It could accelerate his understanding of what truly mattered to me, expose him to values different from those he'd absorbed in the financial world. But it also risked entangling our separate journeys at a time when some distance might be healthier. Catherine called later that evening, perhaps anticipating my questions. "I hope you don't mind that I offered Ben the position without discussing it with you first," she said without preamble. "Harold thought it might be the right fit, and our office manager just gave notice. It's fine, Catherine. I trust your judgment." "But are you sure Ben is qualified? Healthcare administration is quite different from investment management. He has transferable skills, financial analysis, client relations, staff supervision, the specialized aspects he can learn." She paused. "Besides, this arrangement accomplishes several objectives at once. It gives Ben legitimate income during a difficult transition, provides our clinic with skilled administrative help, and allows him to make indirect amends by supporting work that matters to you. You've thought this through. I generally do." Catherine's tone was matter of fact. "Just to be clear, though, this isn't about reconciling you two. That's your private business. This is strictly a professional opportunity that happens to benefit multiple parties." "I appreciate the distinction," I said. "And I do think it could be good for Ben to see another side of professional life, one measured by impact rather than income." "Exactly. Whether it takes or not is up to him." After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, the evening's last light fading to dusk. Birds called to each other as they settled for the night, and somewhere down the street a child's laughter drifted on the mild air. The rhythm of life continuing, unaffected by personal dramas. A text message from Harold broke my reverie. "Heard about Ben's new job. Hope that's okay with you. Seemed like a worthwhile experiment." I smiled slightly at his characteristically understated phrasing. Harold never pushed or pried, but his gentle interventions often created unexpected opportunities for growth. "It's fine," I texted back. "An interesting next chapter." "Speaking of chapters," he responded, "have you given more thought to the medical board's mentorship proposal?" "I accepted this afternoon." "Good. You have much to offer colleagues in difficulty." His simple affirmation warmed me. Throughout my career, Harold had been my touchstone, the colleague whose opinion I valued above all others. His belief in my capabilities had sustained me through professional challenges and personal doubts. Now, as I navigated the complex aftermath of Ben's betrayal, Harold's steady presence reminded me that family connections, while profound, weren't the only meaningful relationships in life. The week passed in a blur of patient appointments, administrative tasks, and preparation for the medical board's mentorship program. I received the training materials and began reviewing them, finding the structured approach appealing. The program emphasized non-judgmental guidance, practical strategies for addressing specific deficiencies, and emotional support during what was invariably a stressful process for physicians under investigation. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine, mild temperature, flowering trees in full bloom. I drove to the East Side Clinic for my regular volunteer shift, arriving early to review charts before patients arrived. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed Ben's car already there, surprising for a weekend. Inside, I found him in the small administrative office, surrounded by file folders and computer printouts, Catherine standing nearby with a clipboard. "Morning, Dr. Reynolds," Catherine greeted me. "Ben's getting a head start on our filing system reorganization. Turns out we're about 3 years behind on proper archiving." Ben looked up, offering a tentative smile. "Mom, I didn't know you'd be here today." "It's my regular Saturday," I reminded him. "Have been for years." "Right, of course." He glanced at the chaos around him. "Catherine's showing me just how much work this place needs administratively. It's enlightening." Catherine's expression was uncompromising. Nonprofit doesn't mean disorganized. By the time Ben starts officially on Monday, I expect a complete assessment of our administrative weaknesses and a prioritized action plan for addressing them. "Are you always this demanding of brand new employees?" Ben asked, a hint of his old confidence surfacing. "Only the ones with something to prove. Catherine replied evenly. Now, if you'll excuse us, Dr. Reynolds has patients to see, and you have filing to organize. I hid a smile as I left for the examination rooms. Catherine's no-nonsense approach was exactly what Ben needed. Clear expectations, direct communication, and work substantial enough to engage his intellect while keeping his ego in check. The morning passed quickly, with a steady stream of patients. Children, needing vaccinations, seniors managing chronic conditions, working adults fitting medical care into busy lives. Around noon, I took a brief break, stepping outside for fresh air. To my surprise, Ben was in the small courtyard behind the clinic, eating a sandwich on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. He looked up, gesturing to the space beside him. "Please, I needed a break from Catherine's filing system boot camp." I sat, unwrapping my own lunch. She's thorough. That's one word for it. Drill sergeant is another. But there was no real complaint in his tone, more a grudging respect. She knows her stuff, though. I've already identified 3 areas where I can streamline operations and probably save the clinic money. That's impressive for your first day. Well, it's what I'm trained to do, find inefficiencies, optimize systems. He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. The context is different, but the principles are similar. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, enjoying the spring sunshine and the dogwood blossoms overhead. It was the most relaxed interaction we'd had since the betrayal came to light, perhaps because we were both on neutral ground, engaged in meaningful work separate from our personal relationship. "How are you settling into the apartment?" I asked eventually. "It's adequate. The neighbor upstairs seems to practice tap dancing at midnight, but otherwise it's quiet." He crumpled his sandwich wrapper. "The house is in escrow already. Turns out people are eager for bargains in Oakwood Estates. The closing is scheduled for the end of the month." That was fast. I priced it to sell quickly. I need the liquidity for the restitution plan. He stared at his hands. "Melissa's lawyer called yesterday. She's asking for a clean break. No alimony, no ongoing financial entanglements. Just a quick, quiet divorce with minimal asset division, given that most assets are being liquidated anyway." The lack of emotion in his voice was telling. "How do you feel about that?" He considered the question seriously. "Relieved, mostly. Melissa and I. We wanted different things, ultimately. She wanted the lifestyle, the status. I wanted." He trailed off, frowning. "I'm not sure what I wanted anymore." The following weeks established a new rhythm in my life. 3 days a week at my own clinic, Saturdays at the East Side facility, and now Wednesdays dedicated to the medical board's mentorship program. My first assigned mentee was Dr. James Chen, a cardiologist under investigation for documentation deficiencies. He was brilliant with diagnoses but chronically behind on paperwork, a combination that had finally triggered complaints. "I went into medicine to save lives, not to fill out forms," he told me during our first video meeting, frustration evident in his tone. "Now my whole career is threatened because of administrative details." "Documentation isn't just bureaucracy," I explained gently. "It's part of patient care. It ensures continuity, prevents errors, and protects both you and your patients." "I know that intellectually," he admitted. "But when I'm seeing 30 patients a day, something has to give." Working with Dr. Chen reminded me of my early career, struggles with work-life balance. I shared strategies I'd developed over decades, dictation techniques, template systems, dedicated documentation time blocks. More importantly, I validated his frustration while nudging him toward acceptance of this less glamorous but essential aspect of medical practice. By our 3rd session, he reported modest progress. "I'm only 2 days behind on charts now instead of 2 weeks, he said with a tentative smile. "And I've hired a scribe for my clinic days, which helps tremendously." "That's significant improvement, Dr. Chen. The board will notice that proactive approach." Please, call me James. His expression grew more serious. I want to thank you for not judging me. When this investigation started, I felt like my entire identity as a physician was being questioned over what seemed like technicalities. His words resonated deeply. Hadn't I felt the same way when my competence was challenged? The difference was that James's infractions were real, if fixable, while the allegations against me had been manufactured. Still, the experience of having one's professional identity threatened created a powerful common ground. Meanwhile, Ben was settling into his role at the East Side Clinic. Catherine reported that he was making meaningful contributions, streamlining operations, and identifying potential grant opportunities the clinic had overlooked. When our volunteer shifts overlapped, I observed him interacting respectfully with staff and patients, his former arrogance notably absent. "He's not who I expected," Catherine admitted one afternoon as we watched Ben patiently explaining insurance forms to an elderly patient. "When you first told me what he'd done, I pictured someone colder, more calculating." "Ben isn't a bad person at heart," I said. "He made terrible choices under pressure, but there's goodness in him. You're remarkably forgiving, considering what he tried to do to you." "Not forgiving exactly, just separating the actions from the person. Ben betrayed me profoundly, but that doesn't erase the 3 decades I've known him, loved him." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wise distinction. One many people never manage to make." The sale of Ben's house closed at the end of the month. He used the proceeds to make significant restitution payments to his former clients and settle outstanding debts. His divorce from Melissa was finalized with surprising speed, notable only for its lack of drama or contest. Ben seemed relieved, rather than devastated, confirming my suspicion that their marriage had been built more on mutual aspiration than deeper connection. One evening in early June, Ben called and asked if we could meet for dinner. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you," he said, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in his voice. We agreed to meet at a casual cafe near my home. When I arrived, Ben was already seated, a folder of papers on the table beside him. He looked healthier than he had in weeks, less haggard, more at peace, though still far from the polished financial advisor he'd once been. "Thanks for coming, Mom." He pushed the folder toward me. "I've been working on something I'd like your opinion on." Inside was a business plan for what he called financial wellness services, a consulting firm focused on helping medical practices optimize their financial operations while maintaining patient-centered care. The proposal outlined services ranging from billing system optimization to financial literacy programs for medical staff. "It's still in the concept stage," Ben explained as I reviewed the materials. "But working at the East Side Clinic has shown me how many medical practices struggle with the business aspects of healthcare. Doctors are trained to heal, not to manage finances." I was impressed by the thoroughness of his research and the thoughtfulness of his approach. "This looks promising, Ben. But don't you need your securities license for this type of work?" "That's the beauty of it, I don't. This wouldn't involve managing investments or selling securities. It's purely consulting on financial systems and processes." He leaned forward, enthusiasm brightening his features. "I'd be using my financial knowledge to support healthcare providers, not to move money around for wealthy clients." "When would you start this?" "Not for at least a year. I've made a commitment to Catherine to stay at the clinic, and I'm still bound by the terms of my agreement with the Securities Commission." He took a deep breath. "But I wanted you to be the first to see it, to know that I'm trying to build something meaningful from the wreckage." The sincerity in his voice touched me. This wasn't the Ben who had lectured me about retirement investments or questioned my cognitive abilities. This was someone more reflective, more aligned with values. I recognized. "I think it has real potential," I said honestly, "and it's a natural bridge between your financial expertise and what you're learning about healthcare administration." Relief crossed his face. "That means a lot, coming from you." Have you discussed this with Catherine? Not yet. I wanted your reaction first. You know both worlds, medical practice and dealing with me. His attempt at self-deprecating humor fell a bit flat, but I appreciated the effort. Catherine would have valuable insights. She's managed the Eastside Clinic's finances through some very lean times. Ben nodded, making a note. I'll schedule time with her next week. He hesitated, then asked, How's the mentorship program going? You haven't mentioned it recently. It's been unexpectedly rewarding. My current mentee is making good progress. There's something profound about helping colleagues navigate professional crises. I imagine you're exceptional at it, given your own experience. Ben fidgeted with his water glass. Mom, there's something else I've been wanting to ask you. Yes? Do you think you'll ever fully trust me again? The directness of the question caught me off guard. I considered my answer carefully, knowing Ben deserved honesty. I don't know, I said finally. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It requires consistent actions over time, transparency, accountability. You're showing those qualities now, and I value that. But complete trust? That's a destination, not a decision. He nodded slowly, accepting this answer without protest. That's fair. More than fair, actually. Why do you ask? Why now? Because I'm trying to understand what realistic reconciliation looks like. Not going back to how things were, I know that's impossible. But moving forward in a way that acknowledges what happened without being forever defined by it. It was a thoughtful question, one that reflected genuine introspection. I think that's what we're doing now, Ben. Having honest conversations. Respecting boundaries. Finding new ways to relate to each other as the people we are now, not who we were before. Is that enough? For you, I mean. The vulnerability in his question reminded me of the little boy who used to ask if his artwork was good enough for the refrigerator door. It's enough for now, I assured him. The future will reveal itself as we continue down this path. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics, a challenging case I'd encountered at the clinic, a community garden Ben was helping establish near the Eastside facility. We weren't the mother and son we'd been before his betrayal, but we weren't adversaries either. We were two adults navigating damaged terrain with cautious steps and open eyes. 2 days later, I received a call from Dr. Jenkins at the medical board. Dr. Reynolds, I have some news you might find interesting. We've identified the source of the original complaint against you. My heart raced. Though I'd strongly suspected, Ben had orchestrated the complaint through his friend Scott Jenkins. I'd never had confirmation. The complaint came from Dr. Scott Jenkins, as you may have guessed, she continued. But here's what's notable. He contacted us yesterday to formally retract his statement. He admitted that he filed the complaint based on second-hand information and personal concerns from a third party, without direct observation of any cognitive impairment on your part. Did he name the third party? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He did. Your son, Benjamin Wilson. Dr. Jenkins paused. Dr. Jenkins was quite remorseful. He stated that he'd been misled about the severity of your supposed symptoms and regretted not verifying the information before filing a formal complaint. I see. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Thank you for letting me know. There's more, Dr. Reynolds. Dr. Jenkins has agreed to participate in an educational program about the proper channels for addressing concerns about colleague competence. He'll also be writing a formal letter of apology to you. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, processing this development. Scott Jenkins' retraction couldn't undo the investigation or the stress it had caused, but it represented an important closing of that chapter. Someone had finally acknowledged on the record that the allegations had been unfounded. I wondered what had prompted Scott to come forward now. Had Ben encouraged this step as part of his own amends process? Or had Scott acted independently, his conscience finally overriding his loyalty to my son? That evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, Ben stood on my porch, looking nervous. "I should have called first," he said immediately. "I can come back another time if this isn't convenient." "It's fine, Ben. Come in." He followed me to the living room but remained standing, too agitated to sit. "Dr. Jenkins called me today." Scott, not the medical board, Dr. Jenkins. He said he contacted the board to retract his complaint. "Yes, I heard." "I didn't ask him to do that." Ben ran a hand through his hair. "I mean, I told him months ago that he'd been wrong about your cognitive state, that I'd been wrong too, but I never suggested he contact the board again." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want you to think I'm trying to manipulate the situation, to force forgiveness or redemption on some artificial timeline." His words came faster, more intense. Scott made that decision himself, and while I'm glad he did the right thing, I don't want to take credit for it or use it as some kind of shortcut in rebuilding our relationship. The vehemence of his disclaimer surprised me. "I appreciate your clarification, Ben, but why would I assume you'd orchestrated this?" He looked away, embarrassment coloring his features. "Because that's who I was not so long ago. Someone who engineered situations, who thought he could control outcomes, who believed the right strategic move could fix anything." He met my eyes again. "I'm trying very hard not to be that person anymore." His self-awareness was striking. In the months since his disgrace, Ben had demonstrated more personal growth than in the preceding decade. Crisis had stripped away his carefully constructed persona, forcing him to confront his authentic self. Flawed, human, capable of both terrible choices and genuine redemption. "I believe you," I said simply. "Would you like some tea? I was about to make some." The ordinariness of the invitation seemed to relieve him. "Yes, thank you. That would be nice." In the kitchen, Ben leaned against the counter while I filled the kettle, the domestic scene achingly familiar, yet altered by all that had transpired between us. This was the kitchen where I'd taught him to scramble eggs, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where we'd argued about his career choices. Now we occupied the space as changed people, the air between us cleared of pretense but weighted with history. "I've been seeing a therapist," Ben said abruptly, "since about a month after everything happened." "I'm glad to hear that, Ben. Truly. It's been hard. Looking at myself honestly. Understanding why I made the choices I did." He watched the steam begin to rise from the kettle. "There's no simple explanation. No single moment where I went wrong. It was a gradual erosion of values, a series of compromises that seemed small individually, but led somewhere I never intended to go." "That's often how it happens," I observed, setting out mugs and tea bags. "Few people wake up one morning and decide to betray their principles. It's usually a process." My therapist asked me to identify the core fear that drove my actions. Ben accepted the mug I handed him, wrapping his hands around its warmth. It took weeks to get to the truth, which was that I was afraid of being ordinary, of being just another middle-class professional in a modest house with a modest life. His voice grew softer. "Like you." The admission hung between us, painful in its honesty. "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand that what I saw as ordinary was actually extraordinary. Building something meaningful, serving others, maintaining integrity." I confused status with significance. He took a sip of tea. "I'm still working through a lot of this. It's not a neat, tidy process. Growth rarely is." We carried our tea to the living room, sitting in companionable silence for a few minutes. Through the window, the evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the garden I'd tended for decades. I'd planted many of those perennials the year Ben left for college, creating something beautiful to fill the empty hours when motherhood no longer structured my days. "Mom," Ben said eventually, "I've been wondering about something. When you discovered what I was trying to do, have you declared incompetent, take control of your assets? You could have reported me to the authorities. What I did was attempted financial elder abuse, a criminal offense. Why didn't you press charges?" It was a question I'd asked myself many times over the past months. "Several reasons," I said thoughtfully. "First, proving your involvement would have been complicated without damaging my own professional reputation in the process. A public legal battle would have cast doubt on my competence regardless of the outcome. But there were other ways. You could have confronted me privately, threatened legal action, cut me out of your life entirely. You would have been justified." "Yes, I could have." I set down my tea. "The truth is, Ben, I was trying to balance justice with compassion. What you did was wrong, profoundly, inexcusably wrong. But you're still my son, the child I raised, the person whose well-being has mattered to me above almost everything else for 34 years. I couldn't reconcile punishing you to the fullest extent with that fundamental reality." "So it was maternal love that saved me from prosecution?" "Not exactly. It was recognition of human complexity. People do terrible things for reasons that make sense to them at the time, especially under extreme pressure. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does call for a response that allows for redemption, for change." Ben was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. "I don't know if I could be so philosophical if someone had tried to do to me what I tried to do to you." "Perhaps not. But perhaps you would, if that person was your child." I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. "Ben, I didn't protect you from all consequences. Your life has changed dramatically. Your marriage, your career, your financial stability, our relationship. Those are real consequences. I simply chose not to add criminal prosecution to that list." "I'm grateful for that choice," he said softly, "though I'm not sure I deserved it." Mercy isn't about deserving. It's about recognizing humanity in all its messiness. After Ben left that evening, I sat in my garden until the fireflies emerged, their gentle lights blinking in the growing darkness. Our conversation had touched something fundamental about forgiveness and accountability, about the complicated dance between justice and compassion. I thought about Dr. Chen, my mentee, whose documentation failures had genuine potential to harm patients, yet who deserved support rather than mere punishment. I thought about Scott Jenkins, who had participated in Ben's deception but found the courage to acknowledge his mistake. I thought about Ben himself, rebuilding his life from the ruins of his own creation. What united these stories was the possibility of transformation, not erasing past wrongs, but growing beyond them into something better. My medical career had shown me countless examples of healing after injury, of function restored through careful attention and time. Perhaps relationships could heal similarly, though the scars would always remain. The following week brought an unexpected invitation from Harold. The Eastside Clinic has received a substantial grant for facility improvements, he told me over the phone. "We're having a small celebration tomorrow evening. I'd love for you to attend." "Of course. I'm delighted to hear about the grant." Ben was instrumental in securing it, Harold added. His background in financial analysis proved quite valuable in preparing the application. At the celebration, held in the clinic's newly renovated waiting area, Catherine gave a brief speech, acknowledging all who had contributed to the grant application. When she mentioned Ben's role, I felt a complex surge of emotions: pride in his accomplishments, sadness for the career he'd lost, hope for the person he was becoming. Ben himself seemed embarrassed by the recognition, deflecting praise to the team effort. After the formal remarks, as people mingled with refreshments, he approached me somewhat hesitantly. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "Catherine says your financial projections were crucial to the application's success." "It was a group effort," he demurred. but it feels good to use my skills for something unambiguously positive. I imagine it does. He gestured around at the modest clinic space. You know, a year ago I would have seen this place as depressing. Outdated equipment, basic furnishings, nothing impressive or prestigious. Now I see what actually matters. The care provided, the lives improved, the community served. That's a significant perspective shift. It's strange how losing everything I thought was important helped me recognize what actually is. He smiled ruefully, though I wouldn't recommend it as a personal growth strategy. Few transformative journeys come without pain, Ben. Speaking of journeys, he said, his manner growing more serious, there's something I've been meaning to give you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small envelope, handing it to me. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check, not for a large amount, but significant given his current financial situation. What's this for? I asked, though I suspected I knew. Restitution, Ben said simply. For the legal fees you incurred changing your estate documents, for the security upgrades at the clinic, for the emotional distress I caused. I know it doesn't come close to covering the full cost, but it's the first installment. I plan to continue, making payments monthly. The gesture caught me off guard. Ben had never explicitly acknowledged the financial impact of his actions, focusing instead on the emotional and relational damage. This concrete step toward making amends, particularly, given his strained circumstances, represented a deeper level of accountability. Thank you, Ben. This is unexpected but appreciated. It was my therapist's suggestion, actually. She pointed out that while I've apologized repeatedly, I hadn't taken tangible steps to address the actual harm I caused. He looked embarrassed. She said something about the difference between feeling sorry and making amends. Your therapist sounds insightful. She is, annoyingly so sometimes. His attempt at humor softened the moment's intensity. Anyway, it's just a beginning. I know there's much more to do. Catherine approached then, pulling Ben away to meet a potential donor, leaving me to reflect on this latest development. The check in my hand represented more than money. It symbolized Ben's commitment to concrete restitution, to actions beyond words. It was a promising step in our complicated journey of reconciliation. Later that week, I met with Dr. Chen for our final mentorship session. The medical board had concluded their investigation, placing him on probation for 6 months, but allowing him to continue practicing with enhanced documentation oversight. I couldn't have navigated this without your guidance, he told me sincerely. When the investigation began, I was defensive, angry, seeing it as an attack rather than an opportunity for improvement. That's a natural reaction, I assured him. Few of us welcome scrutiny, especially of our professional practices. You helped me see beyond my wounded pride to the legitimate concerns about my documentation. Now my patients are receiving better care because their records are complete and accurate. He smiled. And surprisingly, I'm less stressed overall. The systems you helped me implement actually save time in the long run. His gratitude was touching, but what moved me more was seeing his growth through the process, from defensive resistance to productive change. It mirrored, in some ways, Ben's journey over the past months. The parallel wasn't lost on me. In both cases, a crisis had precipitated necessary transformation. For Dr. Chen, the board investigation had forced improvements in his practice that ultimately benefited both him and his patients. For Ben, the collapse of his financial scheme had stripped away superficial values and forced a reckoning with deeper truths. Was it possible, I wondered, that my own crisis, the betrayal by my son, the threat to my professional identity, had similarly transformed me? Had defending myself against false accusations strengthened my confidence in my capabilities? Had mentoring others through professional challenges given new dimension to my medical career? These questions accompanied me as July turned to August, summer heat settling heavily over Riverside. My regular medical practice continued with its familiar rhythm, but now enriched by my volunteer work and mentoring responsibilities. The medical board had assigned me a second mentee, a young family physician struggling with appropriate boundaries, and I found our sessions intellectually engaging. Ben continued at the Eastside Clinic. His initial commitment expanded to include grant, writing and financial education workshops for patients. His proposed consulting business remained on hold while he fulfilled his obligations to the Securities Commission, but he continued refining the concept, incorporating insights from his clinic experience. Our relationship was evolving too. Not back to what it had been before, but into something new. The unquestioning trust of the past was gone, replaced by cautious optimism and careful observation. I watched Ben's actions more than I listened to his words, noting the consistency between them. He, in turn, respected my boundaries, never presuming intimacy or forgiveness he hadn't earned. One warm evening in late August, I was working in my garden when Ben's car pulled into my driveway. He hadn't called first, which was unusual in our new, more formal relationship. "Mom," he called, hurrying across the lawn with an envelope in hand. "I just got this and had to show you right away." He handed me the envelope, already opened. Inside was a letter from the Securities Commission detailing the terms of their final settlement with him. The penalties were substantial but not crippling. Most notably, the letter indicated a path to reinstatement of his license after a 3-year suspension, contingent upon continuing education and ethical practice requirements. "This is much better than we expected," I said, genuinely pleased. For him. "Mercer thought you might be permanently barred." The voluntary disclosure and full cooperation made the difference, apparently. Relief brightened his features. 3 years is a long time, but it's not forever. And meanwhile, I can build the consulting business, establish a track record of ethical practice. This is wonderful news, Ben. A real milestone in your rebuilding process. He nodded, taking back the letter and folding it carefully. "I wanted you to be the first to know. After everything that's happened, having a defined path forward, even a difficult one, it means more than I can express." We stood together in the garden as evening settled around us, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue sky. The moment felt significant, not an ending exactly, but perhaps the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" I offered. "Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad." Ben smiled, something of his old self visible beneath the changes of recent months. "I'd like that very much." Autumn transformed Riverside with breathtaking colors, the trees along my street turning vibrant shades of crimson and gold. One crisp October morning, I sat in my office reviewing patient files before hours when Susan knocked on my door. "Dr. Reynolds, there's a package for you." She placed a careful wrapped box on my desk. "The courier said it needs your personal signature." Curious, I signed for the delivery and unwrapped it to find an elegantly bound leather portfolio. Inside was my renewed medical license, professionally framed, alongside a handwritten letter from the State Medical Board. "We are pleased to recognize Dr. Margaret Reynolds for her exceptional contribution to the Physician Mentorship Program. Her guidance has helped restore 5 colleagues to full professional standing and demonstrated the highest ideals of our profession." Below the formal recognition was a personal note from Dr. Jenkins. "Maggie, what began as an unfounded investigation has transformed into a vital resource for physicians in crisis. Your ability to turn adversity into opportunity embodies the resilience we hope all medical professionals can achieve." I ran my fingers over the framed license, emotion welling unexpectedly. This simple document represented everything I'd fought to preserve: my professional identity, my autonomy, my ability to continue the work that gave my life meaning. That it now symbolized not just personal victory, but broader contribution felt like the closing of a perfect circle. Susan peered over my shoulder. That's beautiful, Dr. Reynolds. You deserve the recognition. Thank you, Susan. I placed the frame on my desk where patients could see it. Please hold my calls for 15 minutes. I need to make a personal call. Alone in my office, I dialed Harold, who answered on the second ring. Did you have something to do with this board recognition? I asked without preamble. Harold chuckled. I may have mentioned to Patricia Jenkins how effectively you've been mentoring struggling physicians, but the recognition is entirely earned. Maggie, you've helped transform the board's approach from purely punitive to genuinely rehabilitative. It means more than I expected, I admitted, especially given how this all started. That's often how the most meaningful contributions begin. Not from careful planning, but from personal challenge. You understood what those physicians were, experiencing because you'd been through it yourself, albeit under different circumstances. We chatted a few more minutes before Harold asked, Have you told Ben about the recognition? Not yet. I just received it this morning. You should. He'd want to know. I promised to call Ben later and hung up, reflecting on Harold's suggestion. A year ago, sharing professional accomplishments with Ben had been fraught with tension. His responses tinged with condescension about my little clinic and its modest scale. Now, paradoxically, he might better appreciate this recognition than anyone else. My morning appointments kept me busy until noon, when I took a brief lunch break and called Ben at the East Side Clinic. Mom, hi. His voice held genuine warmth. Everything okay? Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I received formal recognition from the medical board today for the mentorship program. That's fantastic. His enthusiasm sounded sincere. You've put so much into that program. They're lucky to have you. Thank you, Ben. I hesitated, then added, I thought you might understand the significance, given everything that happened. I do. His voice grew more serious. The irony isn't lost on me. If I hadn't triggered that investigation, you might never have become involved with the mentorship program. Life takes unexpected turns. That it does. He paused. Would you like to celebrate? Dinner this weekend, my treat? I know a place within my current budget limitations that still serves decent food. I smiled at his self-deprecating humor. I'd like that very much. After hanging up, I returned to patient appointments, the afternoon passing quickly. My last patient was Mrs. Abernathy, a spirited octogenarian I'd treated for 20 years. After addressing her arthritis concerns, she nodded toward my newly framed license. That's new, she observed. Special occasion? I explained briefly about the recognition, and her eyes brightened. I read about that program in the medical journal my grandson leaves when he visits, helping doctors who've made mistakes get back on track instead of just punishing them. She nodded approvingly. That's exactly what medicine needs. More compassion, less judgment. That's a perfect summary, Mrs. Abernathy. You know, when my Harold was still with us, he made some terrible mistakes. Financial ones mostly. Her weathered hand smoothed her skirt. Everyone told me to leave him, that he'd never change. But I saw the man beneath the mistakes, and I stayed. Hardest thing I ever did, but also the right thing. He turned himself around completely in those last 10 years. Her story touched me deeply. That took tremendous courage and faith on your part. Not faith exactly, clear-eyed seeing. Recognizing that people can change when given the right support and the right consequences. She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. I see you're doing that same work now, just in a different context. Mrs. Abernathy's perspective stayed with me through the evening as I prepared for my weekly dinner with Harold. These days, our friendship had deepened beyond professional camaraderie into something approaching family. We took turns hosting dinner, sharing books, discussing everything from medical research to gardening techniques. Harold noticed my thoughtful mood as we sat on his porch after the meal. You're contemplating something important. I recognize That expression. I shared Mrs. Abernathy's story and my reflection on the parallels between the mentorship program and my evolving relationship with Ben. "She's quite insightful, your patient," Harold said. "There is a similar core principle, believing in potential for change while maintaining appropriate boundaries." "Do you think I've found the right balance with Ben?" I asked, voicing a question that frequently troubled me. Sometimes I worry I've been too forgiving, other times, not forgiving enough. Harold considered this carefully. "I think you've been remarkably clear-sighted, Maggie. You've distinguished between forgiveness and trust, between compassion and enabling. Those aren't easy distinctions to maintain, especially with one's child." The weekend dinner with Ben took place at a charming Riverside cafe featuring local ingredients and modest prices. Ben had reserved a table on the outdoor patio, where autumn foliage provided a stunning backdrop. "Congratulations again," he said, raising his water glass in a toast. "Official recognition of what your patients and colleagues have always known, that you're an exceptional physician and mentor." "Thank you." I studied my son's face in the golden evening light. The past year had etched new lines around his eyes, but also brought a depth and humility I'd never seen before. "How are things at the clinic? Catherine mentioned you're developing a financial literacy program for patients." "It's going well. We're focusing on basics, budgeting, understanding insurance, avoiding predatory lending." His expression grew animated as he described the curriculum. "Many of our patients are one medical emergency away from financial disaster. If we can help them build even modest financial resilience, it makes a real difference in their health outcomes." "That's impressive work, Ben." "It's fulfilling in a way wealth management never was." He set down his glass. "The Securities Commission reviewed my case last week. They're maintaining the 3-year suspension, but approved my proposed consulting business with certain restrictions. I can begin taking clients next month." "That's wonderful news." "It is." He looked directly at me, his expression open and earnest. "Mom, I've been thinking about something important. Would you consider being on my advisory board? I need people with impeccable ethics who understand healthcare. You'd have oversight of all client interactions, all contract terms." The invitation startled me. "Are you sure that's what you want? I don't have background in finance." "That's precisely why I need you. You'll see things from the provider perspective, ask questions financial experts might miss." He leaned forward. "More importantly, your presence would signal to potential clients that transparency and ethical practice are non-negotiable priorities." I considered his request carefully. I would need to review all materials thoroughly before agreeing. There can't be even a hint of impropriety. "Absolutely. Everything open to your inspection. Business model, marketing, client agreements, everything." His earnestness was palpable. "I want to build something that would make you proud, Mom. Something that genuinely helps medical practices thrive while maintaining their values." In that moment, I saw the completion of a circle. The son who had once tried to undermine my medical practice now seeking to support others like it, wanting my guidance to ensure he did so ethically. "I'll think about it," I promised, touched by the symbolism even as I maintained appropriate caution. Our conversation shifted to other topics, a challenging case I'd encountered, a community health initiative he was helping coordinate at the East Side Clinic, books we'd recently read. The easy flow of discussion felt like the emergence of a new relationship built on mutual respect, rather than mere familial obligation. As the evening concluded, Ben hesitated before saying, "I've been meaning to tell you something. I saw Dr. Jenkins from the medical board last week at a healthcare administration conference. She told me how much impact you're having on the physicians you mentor. She said one of them described you as the voice of wisdom and compassion when I thought my career was over." His voice grew softer. "It made me realize something important. What I tried to take from you, your professional standing, your independence, has become even more meaningful and impactful because you had to defend it. You're helping doctors who made actual mistakes find their way back, while I tried to convince everyone you were incompetent when you weren't. That's a profound observation. Ben, I'm still ashamed of what I did, he admitted, but I'm trying to find meaning in it, to let it shape me into someone better. Driving home that night under a canopy of stars, I reflected on our journey. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed our relationship had instead transformed it, burning away pretense and conditioning, leaving something more genuine in its place. The path hadn't been straight or easy, with setbacks and difficult moments along the way, but the direction was unmistakable, toward truth, toward growth, toward reconciliation. The framed medical license now displayed prominently in my office symbolized more than professional standing. It represented resilience in the face of threat, strength discovered through vulnerability, and the power of turning personal crisis into broader contribution. What had begun as an attempt to declare me unfit had ultimately revealed and reinforced my fitness, not just as a physician, but as a mentor, a guide, and yes, even as a mother navigating the most painful of betrayals. Some wounds never fully heal, leaving scars that remind us of our vulnerability. But those same scars can become testaments to our capacity for resilience, markers of battlegrounds where we discovered our true strength and worth. The day I received my medical license renewal wasn't just about continuing my career, it was about reclaiming my narrative and transforming it into something that could light the way for others facing their own dark nights of professional crisis and personal betrayal. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.